Welcome to the Shit Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name is Richard Basalato, and for once, I am in the middle.
For now.
And my name is Joe Augustine, and welcome to the Shit Show. Actually, what's interesting about this is probably going out live on YouTube, but it's going to take a few more seconds before it ends up on LinkedIn. So what we say right now may not even show up on LinkedIn. The show is a show that tries to untangle the poly crisis, which begs a few questions for some people. What's the poly crisis, and why are we bothering? Well, the poly crisis is the large number of things that are going wrong in the world, and they're kind of interconnected, as you'll hear on today's show and on every show, more or less. And we also try to do this. We try to bring in extra points of view. Now, we had David, whose dental demons caught up with him and took out a tooth. So he is currently lying reclined in a dentist chair. But we have somebody else who is coming in to be our fourth voice on the show. And Andrea, you know him pretty well.
I do. Our guest is Tobias Wilson, but I'm going to call him Tobes because that's how I met him, or Toby. We met a long time ago. So he was one of the big stars in the marketing creative services space in Singapore, and that's where we met. And I think I became island-based before you did, but then you decided to give it all up and move to Bali. And he set up an aerobic digestion solutions and organic waste management systems called Shiva Industries. And we're going to get really stuck into that. And we're going to talk about it. But yeah, Tobes, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. And one of the things the reasons I wanted to invite you is because you're I think everyone should be doing something, whatever it is, even if it's individual action at home. Everyone should be doing something. If they know that we've got a problem, let's get on with tackling it. And you did. You saw a problem and you've decided to tackle it. So we're going to talk about that more. But we're both country Victorian people. But give us a bit of your story.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm glad I'm not in a dental chair. My legs are okay there, Joe. So happy to fill in for David. Look, it's a real pleasure to be here. And Andrew, obviously, yeah, we've spent some time together. Which is awesome in the Singapore days. So I think it's in Singapore just under 17 years in the end. So got there just before the GFC, perfect, and then rode that out. My story, look, if I start at the farm, so if I start at Bendigo, I never wanted to be on the farm. You know, when I was there. It was a whole lot of hard work, and we had a pretty big drought as I was sort of moving out of the farm, moving into town, and I didn't appreciate it for what it was. And it's only in my later years that I've come to appreciate that, and even more so now as I sort of return to the farm or return back to ag, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. I left the farm and started off in hospitality. Like I think most kids do, dropped out of school. So I left at the first term of year 12. I enjoyed being at school because of my mates and stuff like that, but I didn't enjoy the structure of school. And I wanted to get on with my life, you know. So went into hospitality and then fell into sales and then marketing and then advertising, and then ended up at an agency in Sydney and then got lifted into a gig into Singapore. Built and sold 2 agencies there over that period of time. Met my beautiful wife, had my 3 kids, and then COVID kind of hit and rattled the cage a little bit, getting stuck in a home, a small apartment, really, with a family of 5 and a helper. We were fortunate enough to have a helper. With only one of us allowed to leave the house, and all of the things that everybody went through. I don't want to trigger anybody this early on. We'll get people dropping off. But it rattled the cage a little bit, and I think my wife and I started having discussions about potential next steps. And it wasn't until we both left our corporate jobs and we're working for ourselves and realized that nobody was paying us to be in Singapore anymore, which was it never happened to any of us, and a real sort of, oh wow, why are we still here? And so we put the search out. You know, she was born and raised in London, but her parents are Vietnamese. So we had London, so we explored that. We have Vietnam, we explored that. I'm an Aussie, so you know we definitely looked into that as well. And then Bali came up. We built a villa here in 2012. And you know what? I think we're not alone here. Come to Bali, or you go, you know, Phuket, same, Andrew, right? You go on these island holidays, and you get to the last night, and you're like, or even maybe a couple of days in, you start looking at property, and you're like, maybe we could live here. But it's always a pipe dream. It's always, you know, just that sort of holiday fantasy. I'd always had that with Bali, and yeah, somehow it just sort of worked, and we ended up here. So that was early 2023. The decision happened really quickly. But once we'd made it, but yeah, that was it, and we haven't really looked back from then.
Nice. Oh God, you had 3 young boys locked in apartments during the pandemic. We were in Phuket the whole time. It was such a privilege, you know. We had a big pool and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, people in apartments. A lot of them moved to Phuket during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean,
big issue.
Every day I felt like Joe Rogan, you know, just sort of commentating on the UFC. It was like, top notch. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, they're tearing each other in the apartment apart on a daily basis.
Yeah. Oh, nightmare. But you've also just recently gone through the Bali flood. So I thought we were going to talk about that last week. It was one of the topics we couldn't. So that was your first experience of a major flooding event in Bali, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had arguably one of the wettest wet seasons, I think, in 50 or 60 years over Christmas. And we were here. Yeah. But it was, you know, long, consistent wet. Whereas this was a freak storm. There wasn't a lot of warning unless you were really plugged in and monitoring all the channels, which nobody is. It wasn't raised on any of the chats that I'm on, whether either community based or sustainability based or anything like that. And it felt like we were in the thick of the storm all night. It started, the first time I sort of clocked it was about midnight, and it was still window shaking at 5 a.m. Wow. It just didn't go away, which is just such a strange thing after sort of 20 years in Southeast Asia. The tropical storms are a thing, right? And those early morning storms, in particular in the dry season, you know, they're very common. And this was one of those, but it never went away. It was there for hours, and the torrential rain that came with it. Yeah, it was horrific.
I saw a lot of road destruction. I mean, property destruction, landslides. Did a lot of landslides? Yeah, because a lot of the properties are built without that real, you know, the code that's required to keep a building in place or a mountain up. So that was one of the things that used to freak me out in Phuket as well. The landslides were just appear out of nowhere. Yeah. And once again, you know, we've had quite a lot of unseasonal rain in the dry season, and so, you know, we had quite a few trees come down and in between the wet season and dry season. I'm going to stop saying season in a second. But we had quite a lot of trees come down, so it was quite waterlogged anyway. So, you know, the land is unstable on top of all of those things that you mentioned around, you know, land clearing and land management. Wow. But you and your family and your employees and everyone that you know, everyone was okay?
Everyone's healthy. We had some employees get pretty heavily affected, and so we sort of jumped in there to help them. But other than that, we are okay. But I think it's been horrific for those affected and those generally in lower income areas, sadly, as these things go. I mean, the death toll's over 20 now. And there's still, I went past the road today. It still hasn't been touched. It hasn't been fixed. They haven't gotten to it yet. But still a huge cleanup in progress.
So if someone's just joined this conversation and just hearing about you've gone and built up went to Bali, bought a property, made a villa, They probably missed the part about what you do day to day. So let's just get back to that and the reason why you're on the show today for your perspective. What is it that you do day to day?
Shiva Industries is we're an aerobic digester manufacturer. Our machines turn any organic matter into a really nutrient dense, it's called a digestate, in 24 hours. That's the simple thing. We turn organic waste into value in 24 hours. That's put it as simply as I can.
Yeah. And we're gonna dig into it, but I think based on how we started the show last week, I got some feedback. People like the 1 minute summary of all the things that we didn't talk about, but also just to sort of catch up with where we were last week, which was of course within like 24 hours after the Charlie Kirk murder and everything that's gone on since. But so I'll start with what we're not going to talk about, just to give you a sense of all of the crazy stuff going on. Yep, Joe?
Yeah, before you start this list, I want you to note the kind of world we live in, where the following list is the stuff that's not important enough to speak about.
Yeah. I don't know if it's not important enough. It's just we can't cover it all.
Just know where we're going.
So,
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So last weekend, so since our last show, basically, we're not going to talk about the UK Tommy Robinson March, which of course Richard is in the UK. Trump's called on NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil. Trump ordered the US military to kill 3 more narco terrorists in international waters. There was some fantastic footage of FBI Director Kash Patel really getting slammed in his Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. His responses, as well as the way the Senate, the senators were speaking to him. Peter Thiel is getting a lot of coverage, and one of them is his obsession with the Antichrist. The royal visit. Richard, you might want to cover that. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East, obviously, since Israel bombed Qatar. The Middle East came together. But one of the big things that happened this week is Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have signed a defense pact. And what was interesting in the piece that I read, which will be in the weekend reads, is Saudi Arabia hosts the Muslim world's most sacred sites, and Pakistan is the only Muslim nation with nuclear weapons. So to me, that was a pretty important part of the story. The attacks that are going on Gaza City, and to continue with what we've talked about before, there's a piece in Al Jazeera, and it says people run for their lives from airstrikes and explosive-laden robots. As lifelines collapse in Gaza's biggest urban center, there's still 740,000 people in Gaza City, and that's basically 35% of the population, which is 2.1 million. So that's pretty gruesome. But these explosive-laden robots, it's like they will soon be sold to a government in your country, and they'll be positioned as war-tested. And of course, Robert Redford's death. So that's the ones we didn't talk. Anything else that happened this week that we aren't talking about? We probably should have.
Flooding on the bridge between Sweden and Denmark.
Ah, okay.
They had to stop the bridge of the heavy rains. Actually, the bridge was kind of intact, but the rains were so heavy, the road on the Danish side got flooded, and they were afraid that it would start washing away structural parts. So they stopped the traffic. Yeah, first time. And the rains were actually not that heavy. I think it was partly very poor maintenance because no one really saw it coming. But it's interesting pictures when you see, thousands of cars just left on the bridge and people walking with suitcases towards the airport. So,
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously Punjab is still, it's just been horrendous what's been going on. So, who wants to start your sort of key takeaways from the US in the last week since Charlie Kirk's murder? Where do we even begin? It's just crazy, right? It's just, I don't know. I can't see a way out at the moment because there's no cool heads prevailing. Even Barack Obama's getting involved and he's not supposed to. Yeah.
No, it's getting... I would label it as pretty infected debate because we are once again not really dealing with the underlying issue, which was it was cold-blooded murder. And that would, if anything, as a news item, again, raise U.S. gun laws. You know,
Yeah.
that for me would be the obvious thing to talk about, how you can carry a gun into an area like that and not being out hunting effectively, which is, in my opinion, what guns should be for. So, the debate is getting really infected. There are more threats from Trump on shutting down media licenses, which, as far as I understand of US legislation, they can't really do because it would be an obstruction to one of the amendments of free speech.
First Amendment,
Yes,
yeah.
First Amendment, yeah. So it's gone from kind of shocking towards, for me, just ugly, but not surprising at all.
And the hypocrisy, right? It's just that's the thing. It's just crazy hypocrisy. So the Jimmy Kimmel firing obviously came up, right?
Yeah.
Just in the last 24 hours, and that's just set off a whole new conversation around the whole thing. But it's against the First Amendment. But apparently, it was the fact that he said it was one of theirs that killed Charlie Kirk, and that's been positioned as a falsehood, even though we actually, like, the message around that, you know, the governor of Utah sort of shared this so-called letter, and then there's been other people sort of referring to the letter saying a 22-year-old wouldn't write like that in this, who's from game culture. And so what we were talking about last week, it doesn't matter what comes out, no one trusts.
No, you're way at that point, I think. And that might actually be the most important outcome of this whole quite sad story, is that this is the final nail in the coffin for any form of belief or, you know, even acknowledgement that the truth is being said from official sources around the world, because I think we're past that point now. And we're not talking, you know, about a third world country in a developing part of the world where you have an autocratian guy or woman backed by the military. This is what we perceive as being a democratic state with free speech and media that would be able to report pretty much whatever they want. And we're past the point where there's any truth out there.
Yeah.
And I think people are acknowledging that. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
You might.
Erica Kirk, his widow, has been named the CEO of Turning Point Asia. So that's good, because you know, it doesn't mean that women have to be in the kitchen, right? George Soros is obviously absolutely in the crosshairs, and I'll be really intrigued if they go after him and his foundation. But it's the whole Antifa thing we talked about last week. It's Antifa isn't a thing. It's not a movement. But what the great risk of this is, so that Trump's saying he's going to designate it a terrorist organization. What this means is anyone who does something that he doesn't like can be slapped with the Antifa brand and charged with terrorism. And that to me is a massive, massive issue.
Yeah. You get the blanket, all-encompassing ability to effectively remove whoever you want. What does that remind us of?
Tobes, what are you been thinking about?
Well, this for me has been where opportunity meets preparation, right? I mean, this is what they've been getting ready for. At some point, something's going to happen, and you're going to ride the wave. And so I can't recall in that list of initial suspects that I came up with when I mentioned on the last show if I included the Republican side of things as well, because this is the ultimate chess piece sacrifice. If you were playing a game, it's the ultimate kind of move you could make. Because now we know that the story is different, and as I find out more about the shooter, we should say alleged shooter, even though everything seems to point that way, you find that their intentions may not have had anything to do literally with politics. They may not have had a side. They could have been a very disgruntled human being in the middle of everything that was happening, right? Yeah. And it actually made me think about the situation especially with Jimmy Kimmel, because I've watched Jimmy Kimmel, and I have to say I've not really appreciated. I know he's funny, I know he's edgy. I've never quite liked what he was doing in terms of the bullying way that he tends to go about it. He is the counter bully and some people like that because he's a bully on your side. But what he said was actually inflammatory. It was not helpful. It was completely the kind of thing you would not say, especially when something like this happens. So in terms of just purely on taste, I think there's a reason to take him off the air for that, and that's just my perspective. And I think companies have a right to express taste. It's a Disney.
But he has the
company.
right to say it, right?
So the thing about First Amendment, and frequently it's confused, is that it's not the right for everyone to say anything without any consequence, right? It is about your right to criticize the government. That actually is what it is. And this wasn't a criticism of the government. It was an incendiary thing to say. Just from a broadcasting perspective, if I looked at it from my career, I've done lots of things where I've received punishments for things I've said on the air. Some came immediately, some came later. And there's a list of things where I go like, I could have played that a bit differently. And I heard what was said. And the problem with a lot of stuff like this is that your prosecution must survive the transcript. And unfortunately, the transcript looks really bad. And that's one of the things that you lose sometimes when you take away the comedic performance of things. And you look at the transcript and you go like, this is an awful, awful thing to say. So that's one part of it. The other part of it that's been really getting me about this whole story is how people look at Charlie Kirk, and a lot of people on the moderate side, on the centrist, are speaking of him as someone who was engaged in debates. And he used to, like he was on Newsom's podcast. I heard him on a few other podcasts as well. And as I was listening to him there, I thought, yeah, this guy does sound like someone who actually enjoys getting into the debate, and he actually sounds like someone who's civil. But I think you have to look at things from a total perspective, right? Was he a good man who did evil things, or was he an evil man who did things well? Because when you look at the stuff that he was behind and pushing and standing behind in terms of movements, in terms of the behavior that I would say would be hurtful to others and causing victimization and stuff like that. I can't say from that perspective that he is the same person who was just there to have a debate, because I think you have to recognize someone can have an agenda and can be someone who can be very hateful and know the right thing to say in the right place as well. And I've come to settle on that perspective, as in like, and it's a very dangerous position for me to put myself in, because I don't think many people really know the whole story and see what actually happens. Right? There are people on lists that he's put people on lists to be
targeted,
harassed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's responsible for that kind of action as well. He's responsible for the kind of thing that his debating side of things seems to indicate he would not approach things with. So it's an inconsistency. There is a projected image, and there is a kind of thing which happens. I think in liberal media, especially, right? You tend to look for the similarities that you have as well, and that's very natural in human terms. And what I see a lot of them falling for sort of is like, oh yeah, he was pretty good at the debate, so he's I guess he's not so bad. He's quite a nice guy after all. And I watched him on I think it was Newsom's podcast, and there were certain things about the way he was behaving regarding the way Newsom was speaking. But I went like, nah, this is someone who is playing the right cards in that particular moment. Someone who's so vehemently opposed to certain ideas, not pushing back quite as hard, not making it as a non-negotiable as possible. And I think one of the things that, for me, that got me anyway, was this thing about using the Lord's name in vain. That part of this. I don't know if you've seen that podcast, but along the way, Newsom says a number of times where he just says, "Oh, Jesus Christ," and then he makes a mention of it. And at the end of the podcast, where Newsom apologizes for it, you see that Kirk's response is a little bit. It's like, it's okay. You know what? It's all right. Something like that, right? Which just made me go like, oh, that seems performative.
We've got Frank commenting here, an adult debating university students is just another form of bullying, which I think is interesting. But his earlier comment, comedy is drama plus time. It may have needed more time. And I think that, but we've got the situation where the Fox News journalist said homeless people should be, killed, and he just apologized and he gets on with his job. It's the double standards and the hypocrisy. And it feels like the left is falling over itself to, do the right thing at this time, and they're still not getting it right. But I've heard him, calls for him, if he was born in Jesus' time, he'd be the 13th apostle. And then there's the Poke's doing some really good work at the moment. I don't know if you said it, but basically this person said, it hit me today. This generation would have crucified Christ. And it got some really funny comments, like, unlike Christ's generation, which famously let him go, and MAGA would have deported him to a hellhole prison in El Salvador, because the whole point of Christ is he actually gets rejected in life, right? Tobes, what about you?
Look, I think as we sort of caught up last week, mate, I've been so focused on Shiva that I haven't been diving into this stuff. And to be fair, since we moved to Bali, we pulled away from a lot of this stuff. I had to, because I had to ask. Ultimately, came down to me asking the question: what can I do to help this situation, and what does this situation do to help or hinder me? And beyond being completely extractive with my time and winding me up in my cortisol levels and things like that, it doesn't really ultimately matter to me, and it will not affect myself, my family, my children. So I didn't need to be as well studied. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a total hermit.
I'm just that comment that it won't impact you. You don't think this has a ripple out effect?
No, not to me, not in my little world. And I think the problem is I look at some of the people that I know back in Oz, and we get on a call every now and then, and it's all about, oh, look at Trump and look at London and then look at all this sort of stuff. Like, why does that matter to you? Like, why are you wound up about it? What's so wound up that I haven't seen you in months or whatever, and you want to have this time with us that we're sharing? You want to talk about this madness on the other side of the planet. So yeah, look, from my macro view of all of this sort of stuff look, I think Joe covered it. It's the sacrificial chess piece, fortifying one's side and strengthening one's position, but it'll swing back the other way. And the other side will get a sacrificial lamb, and that'll help fortify their side, and then that'll help swing some more people from the middle back to the right, or over to the right, or back to the left and over to the left. And we just get more and more and more extreme. And therefore creating more and more hate and negative energy on opposite sides of the playing field that, I think, yes, the media and the politicians and the billionaires feed off. So there's no money for the bad guys in the middle. It's well within their interest to keep everybody as far as extreme and separated, divide and conquer. It's age old. To keep them as separated as possible. So and
that's the thing, Tobes. Like, how, like, when you look back in history, you go, how did that happen? How did that happen? And here we are in the middle of this is how it happens, right? So, all right. It's so there's a piece in I can't remember what it was called, but it's a right wing publication. I think it's called The Federalist. We can give no clemency to the assassination left. That's the title, right? Charlie Kirk, a man known for his love of country, open and respectful debate, and Christian faith. Well, we've heard a lot of Christians not sort of agree with that. We do not need unified condemnations followed by zero action. Happens after every gun killing, right? The time for conversation is over. The left only ever wants to turn the temperature down when their rhetoric gets someone shot or killed. And then they turn around and build it back up again. And then people, whether they be praying at a school, contributing to public discourse, or running for president, get shot or killed. Yeah, I know, but 76% of those killings are from the right wing, not the left wing. So yeah, the spread of this rhetoric are not fringes of the far left. And I think, when you kind of read stuff like that, I mean, this is what those people actually believe. And, that I think that we need to listen. I know Joe does. This is what they believe, but I can't see another path because this energy has to go somewhere. It's not just going to dissipate. So that's probably what concerns me.
Are we just like, Joe mentioned lists earlier and Charlie Kirk's list. But I think lists exist everywhere. Lee Kuan Yew had quite a famous list. Politics, every politician, they have a naughty and nice list for sure. And slander and all that sort of jazz is right. The media, absolutely. I think the Murdochs have been collared for having target lists. I think that's par for the course. And back to your point there, Andrew, about this is what these people think. They might have an inkling, or they might be a little bit that way inclined, but they're supported by the data to get clicks, to get viewers, to get subscribers. So a lot of them are becoming more and more extreme because actually that's where the success is for them. That's where the growth is for them. So they're almost being conditioned by the data to become more extreme or to explore specific topics. I mean, the amount of stuff on social media from Charlie Kirk stuff was horrific. But it was just people trying to get likes. It's just people it's not necessarily good Samaritans going, look at this horrible thing that's happened. Rest in peace. It was, how do we trigger people the most? Like, how do we get the most share? And sadly, I think the algorithm is a destructive one ultimately. Whether you're a politician or you're an influencer or you are, in the press.
And we've shown the influence map, but the right wing influence map is like colossal by comparison to the left, and not just. And this isn't media; this is influencers, right? And that's where all the money is too. So it's not just the algorithms. There's money being funded into this side, and if we wanted to make money doing what we're doing here, we just need to become right wingers, and we'll be able to find someone who will fund it if we support a message. But if we keep doing the way we're doing, there's no funding coming for stuff like this, right?
Or we build a centrist algorithm, and we're fine.
and that's right. We do need to do that. But the multi-billionaires, that want to build a better world, start funding voices that can contribute to that. But there's no funding in this work.
The preceding program was brought to you by MAGA and Antifa.
Right. All right, so let's get on to Shiva Industries, shall we?
Cool.
Because I think this story will be around for a while.
Absolutely.
I just worry for my American friends. It's a brilliant country. We've all been there. We all love it. It's amazing, right? And it's just really hard watching what's happening, I think, for all of us. But anyway, Toby, you moved to Bali, and the original aim was actually to spend time with your family. But before long, you started Shiva Industries. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, look, it's sort of that big role in corporate life. And I was buggered, honestly. I was pretty broken when we got to Bali. It's just too hard, too fast, too long. Traveling a couple of weeks a month and with young children. I wasn't being a fantastic dad. I thought I was, because I was out providing and doing all the right things, but I wasn't. And so getting to Bali was about spending as much time as possible with the fam and reconnecting with them, but also with myself, because I'd sort of morphed into what I thought I was meant to be a good corporate citizen and within my career, and this is what I should say and do and look like and be like and sound like. So it was definitely a journey of rediscovery. and that takes time and space, and I don't think the modern world gives the majority of us any of those two, and certainly not enough. So just to keep us in the hamster wheel, you know. So growing up in the country, no stranger to hard work and or get my hands dirty, and the waste issue in Southeast Asia is pretty in your face. And so I started doing some beach cleanups and river cleanups, and you know, just off my own back, just to keep myself busy. And it's actually one of my recommendations to a lot of people that exit Singapore or corporate life or whatever, and have come over to Bali and say, hey, what do I do? Physical philanthropy is my number one recommendation. Go and break a sweat for somebody else. You know, go and do something that has got nothing to do with you, nothing you can't benefit from it in any way. You only benefit others. Go and break a sweat. Because it was a real epiphany for me, is that time where you are in service of others. It's you time, you know, you're just processing in your own mind. You're not on any clock. There's no expectations. There's none of that, you know, it's just you and the task at hand. The benefit of other people. So I just started doing that. And on the back end of that, you know, really starting to get deeper into the waste issue and realizing how much stuff we were cleaning up, and plastics being the most visible, I sort of went down that path. And so I started following the plastic. Like, where does it go? What happens to it next? Like, I understand it's no longer on this beach or in this river, but where does it go next? And really got plugged into the sustainability scene here through that sort of path, and then went from plastics to metals to construction waste, and along that journey met some fantastic individuals doing really great things, and realized that it was pretty well served, especially the plastic side of things. It's pretty well served. A lot of I would say that 95% of the investment, 95% of the action actually goes into recycling, and sort of cleanups through to recycling, etc. From that process, a guy from the US reached out, and we connected, and he came over and he wanted to build something really sustainable, and I was connecting him to my network in the industry. And as we were sort of cruising around Bali, he's like, why are they burning all of that rice straw? Like, do they not know how valuable it is? I was like, no, it's, you know, it's putting some carbon back into the crops like their grandfathers and their great grandfathers have done, etc., and getting rid of the waste in the process. Turns out that, you know, 90% of waste in Southeast Asia is burnt. So it's not a good thing. But he started talking to me about organic waste. And honestly, this is, I don't know, July 2023. He's like, what happens to the rest of the organic waste? I was like, I don't know. I mean, they chuck it in the river, or it gets burnt, or it goes back into nature, you know? That's what it does, right? And he was like, no, you're really wrong. And you know, subsequently I found out how drastically wrong I was. You know, I think that food waste produces about 2.6 times more greenhouse gases than the entire airline industry. Yeah. You know, it's 10% of our emissions globally is from the food that we waste. And that's just the methane and things like that. But it's a major issue, and I had no idea. And so he was a digester expert. And so we started talking, and light bulbs and all of those sorts of things. And yeah, it kind of went from there. He introduced me to obviously the problem and how big it was. And when I started researching in Indonesia and the region, I realized how drastically underserved this problem was. And then it was really just learning about the technology. And so there are two sort of main areas of digestion: aerobic digestion, which is heat, oxygen, and microbes, and anaerobic digestion, which is heat and microbes. So remove the oxygen, a lot more dynamic, a lot more heat, but you can create biofuels and energy and all of that sort of jazz. And I believe there's over 1,100 of these plants in China in particular, but they are dotted all around the world.
So, Toby, sorry, just to interrupt you there. Just talk about digestion. What do you mean when you say digestion? what goes in, what comes out? What do we understand? How are we supposed to understand what digestion means in your context?
Oh, it means the same thing as your breakfast this morning, Joe. You know, food goes in and organic matter comes out. It is microbial digestion. So
Right.
so with our systems in particular, it's heat, oxygen, and microbes. So any of that food waste goes in. The microbes, our microbes in particular, operate thermophilically. So they only wake up and start breeding, multiplying, consuming at temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius. But they will turn anything organic into a really nutrient-dense digest state. It resembles a compost. No smell, no bacteria, no pathogens, anything like that in 24 hours. And that includes bones, hoofs, teeth, and anything you want. So for the right size machine.
So meat, fats, cheese, all that sort of stuff too, right? Okay, that's good.
Everything. So the right size machine, you can put a whole cow inside. And within 24 hours, hoof to horns, it's gone.
Wow. Well, tell us about the machine. So you obviously built the machine in Bali because it was too expensive to import it. So tell us about the machine.
Yeah, so November 2023, we got our first factory. We'd done all of our sort of online and digital prototyping and stuff. Heath, who's our partner from the US, he assembled a panel of experts, 5 others globally, that helped us rapid prototype, which is amazing and the only reason that we are where we are. So we started prototyping on the ground here. We built a local team, and that's the engineering side, but also the microbial side. And honestly, mate, it was a tiny little shed, no walls on some sides, like just dire. But awesome. It felt awesome. You know, it was sort of really bootstrapping it. And very much at that point, guys, like it was an experiment. There was no company name, there was no company bank accounts, there was no thought of the commercial side or anything like that. It was very much an experiment at that point. Could we build something in Indonesia that would even resemble global standards? That's where we started. We started super small. So we built a 300 kilo machine because through our network, there's somebody's like, oh, I think we might be interested in a 300 kilo machine. So that we'll build a 300 kilo prototype and then they can buy it if it works. So that was, you know, honestly, it was a very organic process. So look, the machine is, you know, I've said heat, oxygen, microbes. It's a main chamber, which has our rotors, etc. The rotors aren't there to chop. They're not there to mince, grind, none of that. They're very, very low impact and very low RPM. Excuse me. And they are there to aerate. So within that system, if we don't have the perfect amount of aeration and/or oxygen, then the waste will enter an anaerobic state. Now that's the dangerous side if it's not managed properly, and that's what's happening in landfills. That's what's happening in compost heaps, etc. So the heat that you get in a compost heap is not from the aerobic side. It's actually from it entering an anaerobic state. So, and landfills, this is where we have the biggest issue, because you throw one banana into nature, no problem. You throw 1 million, you've got a problem. Okay. And it's the top 5% or 4% is aerobic. It's getting oxygen. Okay. But everything under that, it forms a crust, and everything under that is digesting anaerobically. And that's what creates these massive amounts of methane. And the term burping methane is come out recently, but that's what landfills are doing globally, are burping huge amounts of methane.
Yeah.
So
80 times more potent than CO2 in the short term, right? It's a massive problem. I think we've already gone from human methane release to nature methane release. The idea was, as soon as we got to the point where methane from nature was released was bigger than human, that we really crossed the tipping point. I think we've already crossed that tipping point, but don't quote me on it, but I think we have. But it's crazy stuff.
Definitely. So the rotors are perfectly engineered to deliver the perfect amount of oxygen to our process. Every digester is different because people use different amounts of heat, different oxygen, and different microbes. There are millions of microbes out there. So finding the right mix for your engineering or designing your engineering around the right mix is for each and every digester business and or sort of practitioner. Then it's an electric motor, so our machines just run on electricity. They can be run on solar or hydro or anything like that as well.
Yeah.
But there's no fossil fuels or anything. And then it's the automation and the software, and the microbes, of course. So on the surface, it's simple: heat, oxygen, microbes. But oh my god, like the amount of failures that we have had and still have when we're trying new things. It's so fickle because it's not one thing. It's not just perfecting the engineering. You have to perfect the automation side, and you have to have the right sensors to be able to do so. Because if you don't deliver the right oxygen or the right heat at the right time, then it won't work. But then having the microbes in there, and you've got to remember, food waste contains microbes as well. So every time you add something in, we have to make sure that we remain the dominant power, I guess, within inside of the machine to make, and the conditions are perfect for our specific microbes to dominate that waste effectively and process it.
So where did you get these microbes from? From nature or?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say I can't see, but yes, nature.
But locally?
They're Balinese microbes.
Yeah.
There's no GMO or anything like that. No, we're certainly our first lab was very, very Breaking Bad. The microbes aren't good, but no, they are from nature. So it's about creating the perfect cohort of these specific microbes.
Yeah, so in Phuket, I know loads of the hotel GMs, and I was talking to all of them about sustainability, getting plastic out of the rooms, composting, and it was at the time, and it's probably changed now. None of them were composting. Some were doing the air to water sort of machines, and Marriott Group definitely led that. But you're working with some of the hotels already. But actually, before we say that, tell me about how long did this process take before you got the actual machine?
We started the factory November 2023. I think we had a machine in February.
That's pretty good.
So we built the machine for the Western, so the Marriott Group, in 4 weeks, built and delivered. Yeah. We'd never do that again. They had a time pressure, and we were a startup. So, I mean, we wouldn't say no to it, but we had teams working 24/7 and people quitting and then being rehired for more money all over the shop. It was not cool, and we wouldn't do it again. But startup life, But yeah, so we had the machine in February, and then we just went into flat out testing. Every single day, initially just trying to get some change in the waste. And then obviously with that 24-hour thing right up front, then we got there and the digestate was crappy. And so we had to go and reverse engineer, work out why it was crappy. And it was a bit of heat, it was a bit of oxygen, the wrong paddle design, the wrong temperatures in the chamber, the wrong heat pads, and then ultimately the wrong microbes. And it wasn't until we sort of locked in on that and could replicate it time and time again with different waste sources, because organic waste is so varied and different. And you mentioned meat earlier. A lot of compost heaps won't take meat because they're lower level microbes, and a lot of times mesophilic microbes. So our machines can take that, but could they handle a whole load of beef? And then we did fish, duck. We put a whole load of cow manure through. We put a whole load of elephant manure through. We did a whole load of bloody avocado pips at one point. I mean, we really tried to fuck this machine up. And we've done that on occasion. I mean, there's a graveyard of motors and gearbox and rotors, and there's a whole lot of my sanity in that graveyard too. But honestly, once again, it was a very organic process. We started just with really small milestones, none of this lofty stuff. I bootstrapped the whole thing, so there wasn't this whole lot of investor money, and we weren't trying to hustle for them and take over the world. It was just like, let's take over this load of waste that somebody has been kind enough to donate to us. And then obviously it was, they said that the initial digestate was wrong. Then it was working out what was right, like how to make that right, and starting to do field testing and lab testing with the output, because it's not just about the machine. So the machine, the primary reason and benefit for the machine is obviously to reduce organic waste. So it reduces the volume by 80 to 90% in 24 hours.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's huge, right? And it turns it from being a really nasty, smelly bacteria, pest, all of these things, waste source and hard to transport and all this sort of stuff, very volatile waste source, into something that's very stable and it doesn't smell and it's, not offensive. But that little bit of residue that's left over, that 10 to 20%, is actually super valuable and super useful to help rebuild soils and or fertilize crops and grow food and stuff. So it's become this sort of double-headed dragon, where we started off on the machinery side, and then, as we've moved into sort of a bit more maturity, and we're starting to focus a lot more on the output side.
And in the testing of that, it's great for the local sort of farmers and rice fields. What else? There's lots of stuff in Bali.
Yeah, definitely. Look, we start off with the main species, sort of your broadleaf, your kangkongs and all of that sort of pak chais and all that sort of stuff. Lower nitrogen requirements, pretty mellow. As long as they get the right water and sun, they're pretty good. But then went into nightshade, so your eggplants, chilies, tomatoes, etc. We've gone into rice, California papaya. We've done some really great testing this year with, and all of the results have been fantastic. The trick is because the numbers move around a tiny bit, not a major amount, but the NPK, so the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which is the main fertilizers are sort of worked categorized. The NPK does move around a little bit depending on what goes into the machine. Now, in a hospitality environment, it's pretty mixed. Okay, like I've been digging around hotel bins for the last couple of years. Everybody thinks they've got unique waste. They really don't. There's a fair bit of rice in there. There's a fair bit of bread in there, meat, vegetables, peels and bones and all that sort of stuff. It's all pretty standard. But if we work with a food processor with their waste, we work with a couple of juicers here. And so we'll pick up their waste. And it might actually be half a ton of banana peels or pineapple skins or anything like that. So we do see some swings in the output. And so that's where it becomes a tiny bit trickier, is it's not necessarily a hyper standardized output. So doing field testing between batches yields marginally different results. But ultimately what you'll see with, say, your kangkongs and things like that, at about a 15% ratio of Shiva to soil, best results. And we have a 2 to 3x increase in yield and root development as well. It's not just like a typical synthetic fertilizer where let's just grow the plant and then screw the soil. But then with nightshade, they require a bit more nitrogen and things like that. So it's generally about a 30% dose. So working on that minutia is incredibly interesting. And sort of, like I said earlier in the show, that getting back to the farm for me is something that is really helping me truly appreciate my childhood and upbringing.
Nice. And then plans for the future. So actually, we probably should go back to the original concept, and the whole theme of the show is the elephant in the room, which is when you really, because we didn't dig into that as much, when you sort of really saw the organic waste problem, because it's like, 72% of the waste is actually organic waste. And I remember in Phuket, the incinerators, I think only one was working in the end. They had 3, but only one was working. And because there was so much organic waste going into the incinerators, it releases moisture, which basically destroys the incinerators, and then it all just gets dumped into landfill. So it's a really huge issue. So as a family, we wash everything. Even if it's going into recycling, we make sure all the food's off it. We've got compost, we've got bokashi. We do everything we can to make sure organic waste doesn't go into the main bins. But 72%, I mean, that's massive. And it's something we've got to get under control, right?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I mean, I'll be a bit bold here. We cannot and will not solve the global waste crisis by recycling plastic. Or creating more recyclable packaging. If we just focus there, which we are right now globally, if we just focus there, it's a race to the bottom. And we've seen a number of recyclers. The margins are already so thin. And globally, we're recycling 9% of plastics.
Yeah.
Bali, that's about 7%. It's pretty good compared to the global average. But we cannot and will not solve this problem by focusing on the recycling it. The number one contaminant which precludes us from recycling plastic and brings that recycled number down to 9% is food waste. And it's the majority of not just Bali's waste flow, of Indonesia's, of Thailand's, of Singapore's, of London's, of Australia. It's everyone's. It's the dominant waste in everybody's waste stream. So the only way that we can fix the increase the recyclability rate of plastics is to sort out organics.
Yeah.
The only way to start chipping away at the rest of the problems is to focus on this problem first. And that was the real epiphany for me as I, was doing the rounds in and around the waste and what we're doing with it in the recycling side. So many great people doing so many great things, but they were so limited.
Yeah.
They couldn't get the plastics or the feedstocks that they needed. They couldn't get the quality feedstocks that they needed to do their job at scale. And so scalability is blown out. And when they did get mixed feedstocks, then it's a cost for them to clean and to try and separate. And I spent a lot of time, especially with what we call here the TPS TGR. So they're basically the 3R landfills. And let's say that one of them gets 10 tons. They might be able to, it says that it's separated, but it's not. They might get 1 ton of separated waste. They might be able to extract another ton out of it, okay? But then the 80% they have to landfill because it's mixed. And the thing here is when it gets to, it's been in a bin for a week and then it's been in a truck for a day and then it gets dumped out at somebody's property for processing, it's pretty bloody disgusting. Don't get me wrong. I haven't chosen glamour here with the waste stream that I'm focusing on, but when it comes off your chopping board or wherever it is, it's not disgusting. You've just eaten it, or you've eaten a part of that. So it comes down to not just going, focus on organics because you're boiling the ocean there, but just focus on separation. Exactly what we're doing at home, Andrea, and I think a lot of people are doing. Just separate it,
and clean it.
Exactly. Yeah, if you have your yogurt tubs and all that sort of jazz, like give them a rinse and your drink bottles and whatever. But yes, absolutely, it was a big thing for me, and I still it's a major hindrance for that movement is that the contamination rate is so high, but there is no glory or glamour in we're going to focus on separation. You're right, Steve. There is no glory or glamour in let's go and tell people to separate. Let's get them a bucket. Let's do education. There's none of that. And we talked about political cycles and things like that earlier. That's not the cool thing. The cool thing is let's get this new plastic collections boat in the ocean. Let's get this cool bit of tech to show us picking up plastics and go really high tech. Pissing in the wind. Yeah,
it's kind of, we need it all, right? Yeah. Richard, I muted you because I think you had there's something in the background.
Yes, I think my neighbor is mowing the lawn.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's why
this year.
so that's why I muted you. But thoughts, guys? Joe, Richard?
It's like being back in school. I can't believe it was this long since I took biology and chemistry. It's like it's all coming back together now. In a bit of a blur, I will readily admit and hold my hands up, but it's extraordinarily cool. And you point exactly to the right questions, right? We make a huge hoopla in the Western world about recycling, separating out your carton, your glass, and your plastics, and the rest we just dump. and it sits for week, 2 weeks, sometimes in big traditional plastic bin liners. It's just not clever. It really, really isn't clever. So how do you make it kind of sexy in the debate to take it to the next level and start doing the simple things right? Because
I
people
think, Richard, South Korea is doing an amazing job. 99% of households in South Korea compost their food.
Yeah.
And it's not just the composting. What they've found is the community where you have to go and take your waste to. It's created more social cohesion. So there's some really beautiful positive stories already out there. I think the UK is trying with its compost buckets, but that priority, like recognizing 72% of the problem is this. I mean, Steve was talking about landfill sites stinking. I've stood under the greatest landfill site in the world in New Delhi, and you wouldn't believe what comes out of that, and leachates leaking out, and what I saw people putting in, and people living in it, literally living in it. Schools next to it, and it's disgusting, and it's always on fire because the methane's burping. It's like, oh, it's revolting, but it's just let's just make a decision to do it. Like start.
But
Tobes is done.
Absolutely, and we've talked about it often enough on this show and elsewhere. It's like it always starts with yourself. It's no good being out there and blame him or blame her, and those are bad guys. It's like, what are you actually doing in your own time, in your own life? You start there. You get your own house in a reasonable order. Yeah. Then you can point and say,
and you build demand around it, right?
Absolutely, and that's what I find really fascinating here. Is like it goes back down to economics.
I was going to talk about that in terms of economics as well. One of the questions I had was really about is there an economic premium to do the right thing in this case? And the other question actually I had is about this thing. Or the other observation about this is we always talk about us doing the thing, right? And I think the way it really works is not about just us doing it, or I think it's about creating the process so it's automatic, right? So I think the way, for instance, the management of the hotel, what they've done is they've made the process, they've created the process so it happens the way it's supposed to happen, and then you get that output. So I tend to go more with the ideas that we sometimes, I think, take on too much hubris and go like, well, I will be the change that I want to be, I want to see. And you go like, no, that really is, like you said, trying to boil the ocean, pissing in the wind, all those different metaphors. That's what you doing it yourself actually is. It's like, I feel good about this and I'm not really changing the world. The real challenge for me is to try and figure out how to change it all, right? And go, okay, so how can we make this happen? And I think, for the hotels, I'm sure there's a reason for it that's also economically sound. Right? It's not just because they have to meet an ESG requirement. Please let it not be that. But, that it makes more sense.
Well, they can fertilize their gardens with it too, and they've all got their own local gardens. But Joe, there's 3 of us here that have lived in Singapore. I don't know what percentage of the population lives in apartments in Singapore, right? And you have garbage chutes. We used to have loads of fun with the garbage chute. A rotten watermelon dropped from the 32th floor used to make a big bang, right? And we used to entertain children. Well, Steve did. But anyway, you got garbage chutes. You're in the kitchen. All you have to do is chuck it down the garbage chute. Done. Over. Right? But the reality is what we need is a culture where the people take their organic waste, which is paper and cardboard as well. It's not just food. You take it downstairs and you put it in a bin where it's going to be processed and then put back into the environment where, like for economic argument, fertilizers full of potash, right? Potash, which is fossil fuels, right?
Yeah.
And it's expensive because of what's going on with the Ukraine war, right?
Yeah.
So here we go. We can create fertilizer just from our own waste. So ultimately, once you get all the stuff in place, it will be economically feasible, and it's better for the environment. And why should we always have an economic argument? Because the problem is, what's happening based on our waste is contributing significantly to tipping us over the edge. So we've got to do something about it, and it's going to cost money to do that. but ultimately it will benefit everyone.
And Joe, I'll give you
I-
one quick financial stat, and then we can move on. We can go back to it. Sorry, just so I'm not sitting here mute, going, tell me the economical benefit, and I'm being quiet. To process 1 ton of waste in our machine, including OPEX, including the manpower, is about $40 per ton. So currently in Australia, I think the tipping fee per ton is about $180.
Wow. And
Wow.
do you have a customer for your output?
Not yet. We've just brought on a team. So we have one of the professors from the Udayana, the big university here, and an agronomist working on a super product for us. We're also working with a biochar company to use our product to charge their biochar, so to make it more immediately beneficial for soils, etc. And we've got a big test going on in Java starting next week.
When you talk about the super product, is that like sort of really condensing it down into something sort of much sort of smaller that can be sort of put into the earth, or what do you mean by that?
Augmenting it. So basically, we would like to be able to give our customers the option where if they have overages, we can buy it back. But in its current form, like I was sort of saying, it moves around a little bit NPK, and it's not as reliable, especially if you're a farmer, putting your livelihood into this product. So the thinking would be that we need to standardize it. So we would collect it from the customer, batch it, and blend it, etc., and then augment it organically to create a stable, but a more potent product for farmers. Still organic, but something of more value, or at least something a bit more dependable from a nutrient perspective, but also at a price point that they can depend on as well.
So the expansion plans, I know you want to sort of build across Indonesia. So when I think about that, I just feel pain at the idea, because I know how complicated it is. Because I mean, the obvious place to start in a place like Bali is the hotels, because they're massive chains and they're everywhere. But talk about the plans and maybe even government support, because I know you've been doing a lot of work with the local governments.
Yeah, look, the hotels were the easier place to start for us. I mean, I had some hospitality at back of house, some understanding of back of house and hospitality, and those processes, and I guess some of those levers. So, and they have their platform is certainly on fire. Yes, Joe, from an ESG perspective, but from a waste management perspective, those costs have been increasing as it's sort of as systems break down, not just here, but in the region. And just a general good corporate citizen and good citizen, actually. You remove the corporate. We need to do something with this super volatile waste source. So, but then malls, any sort of cafeterias, schools, prisons, mines, large corporate cafeterias and things like that, hospitals and food processors, which I've sort of talked about as well. So really, the private sector has been the main focus for us. And whilst it's not the majority of waste in this market, the majority is municipal, but it's a large chunk of waste, which our strategy was, if we take that waste out of the waste flow, then that allows the municipal side to breathe a little bit and gives them a little bit more time to get the systems in place and mature. So private sector, absolutely. Working with the government, the governor here closed main landfill, Suwul, to organics on August the 1st. And it's quite a big call. It's the right call, but it's going to cause some short and medium term pain until we build systems and processes around where does that waste go. So we had the governor's wife, Ibu Putri, in at our factory this week, which was amazing and so intimidating.
It is.
She's an amazing woman, and it was super impressive. She came in, and look, I'm a foreigner, I'm an outsider, but I get gravitas. And everybody feels gravitas. when they see it or they feel it. And I was immediately sort of just humbled and crouching. I think I was crouching the whole time, out of respect, right? And she came in. Yep. And in my broken Bahasa, I was sort of giving her as much as I could about the machine. And this is she listened to maybe 10 points, and then turned to her camera team and went, "Okay, is this the spot? Okay, right." And then went into this beautiful monologue from the parts that I could pick up about organic waste and leachates and the downstream effects and blocking of drains, the whole kit and caboodle. It was unbelievable how she turned one take, just went beautifully delivered this monologue, and then turned back to me and sort of, let's go and talk a bit more about some other stuff. And that's produced, I think, about 18 articles this week. So it's been pretty busy. I've been back in the marketing desk, and she's produced some great films for us and stuff. So I think we'll probably be doing a bit more with the government to help them. I think not to do everywhere, so something that we maybe, Joe, I think you were touching on earlier. Where does it become economically viable, and where does it become culturally viable to use technology? Because we don't have to use technology. We can still compost, and homes should be composting if they can, right? And you can compost in an apartment. So I don't think there's very many excuses why you can't. But in the regional banjars in the villages in Bali, where they have land, they have people to be able to sort of tend to compost heaps, or black soldier fly larvae, which is another fantastic way for processing organic waste with no tech, that produces a protein as well as a fertilizer. Vermicomposting, which everybody knows about. We should be doing all of these things first, and and in a hyper decentralized way. And then if we need to semi-centralize, then we can use technology, etc. Or if there are areas that are a bit more, sort of higher urban density, etc., or hotels and things like that, then okay, we can use technology, but we should be centralizing very little, and ideally just the base residues that can be recycled or are toxic or infectious or any of these things. Those are the only things that should be going to a centralized facilities that has to operate at the absolute highest standards to manage these really harmful waste sources. But the rest of it should be managed ideally as decentralized as possible. And that's really for us where our conversations with the government have been, is that there's 700 banjars in Bali. We don't need 700 machines for that. Ideally, maybe we need 100. But we do need to empower and educate every single citizen on separation at source.
It's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't appreciate about Bali is traditionally the Balinese, I think, was vegetarian as well, right? The food was on a banana leaf, and when they finished it, they'd put it in the water, and that was all part of the natural flow and cycle of life. Whereas then waste came in, plastic waste as well. So, and that's a big part of what's bunged everything up, and also that sort of step back from the land that we've seen in all the Asian nations, with tourism. And the other thing that I think people miss is the islands, the luxury islands where you go and stay at some 5-6-star resort. They don't have waste systems. I mean, you don't have waste systems that work in the main towns or the main regions. You're certainly not going to have them to some little island. So, I'd go out the back of a 5-6-star resort somewhere in Asia on a little tiny island, and there'd be this mass burning, and it was plastic water bottles as well as food waste, and the smell was just horrendous, and that was what they had to do because there was no way of getting it. So it's a big, complicated problem, but I think that the desire in this region, people are closer to the memory of living with the land that way than most of us from the West are. But it's just sort of setting up the infrastructure to make it work. But it's what you're talking about isn't for everyone, right?
No, look, the term for that, Andrew, is actually cultural lag.
Yeah, right.
So Bali has accelerated. In particular, we can talk about Bali. Has accelerated so fast that the infrastructure hasn't had time to catch up, and you go and stay at a fantastic property like Bulgari, down at Uluwatu. And then, you could turn around and see in the distance, you can see Suwung if you have binoculars. The systems and the processes and the infrastructure, and none of the leadership, the people, the constituents of these places, that nobody's had time. This has all happened over the top of them super quick. So you can't be expected, you just can't expect anybody to be able to keep up with that sort of rate of development and that sort of rate of acceleration and growth.
Don't you see the big international brands? Because I see this with Bangalore as well, right? All these big tech companies came in, and the impact of them arriving created so many environmental challenges that they took no responsibility for. And so to me, these big international brands are going to set up a luxury hotel on an island without the infrastructure to support it, and you can't expect the local community and the local councils to do it. So I don't know, isn't that where the obligations should be? I mean, is that where we got it wrong? Rather than just taking all the money and taking all the profit and all the benefits, but not taking on, the other side.
I'd say most of these big brands that are here are probably owned by Balinese or Indonesian people.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that we're not putting it out there that these brands come in and then offshore all the money and leave all the problems. I don't want that picture to be painted. It's not.
And that's a really important point. That's a really important point you made. The brands are there, but they're not owned. Yeah, they're locally owned. I agree.
Yeah, and it's easy. I mean, it's very easy to point at tourism in Bali. 6.3 million international visitors this year, I believe. It's just broken the monthly record. It's very easy to point at tourism, but it's not the major waste source here. It's very easy to point at Java, which we've done historically. It's Java's waste that's washing up on our beaches. It's these are scapegoats, right, for the actual real conversation that I believe that we're having now in Bali, because we've just had these flash floods, and guess where all the waste came from? It came from the rivers, which it came from us. It didn't come from the tourist areas. It came into the tourist areas. So it was a real sort of meet your maker moment, I think. And I think, yes, I believe that in general, corporations don't pay their way in all areas, right? Taxes, right? And I believe they have a responsibility to make the place that they're in better. I think all of us do, actually. And I think we talked about that earlier. As individuals, leave the world a better place than when you came, and or leave a room a better place than when you entered it. Leave a field, leave the beach, all of that sort of stuff, right? And expand your sphere of influence. Look, overall, I think there's in particular on the hotel side, I think they've been working on this for a long time. They have a lot of initiatives, and in particular, Marriott Group, who supported us very early in our journey, wholeheartedly. They have been phenomenal, and we didn't get it right. We installed the machine and things were wrong. I mean, I can remember week 6, month 2, I was inside the machine at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning with an angle grinder, cutting a paddle off that had malfunctioned. And they stuck by us because they knew it was the right thing, and there was no other solutions like ours. There still isn't. We're the only AD manufacturer in Indonesia. So I think they have a responsibility. They know they have a responsibility, and I believe that they are acting. I can't say any industry is acting en masse in the right way. I think broadly as a species, I think we're all misbehaving quite a lot. But
I agree. I agree.
I would sign off on that.
Yeah, but it's but you've sort of grabbed the it's such a complicated problem, and we all play a part. But if you're ever going to a luxury island, that's a boat ride from a main tourist destination, and Renato said it's not just about Bali, and totally agree. We're talking about other places. Take an extra bag and bring your rubbish back and take it home. If you come from a developed nation, and you're going out to a place that just doesn't have a proper waste, take your rubbish home. Because I think that's another obligation. Whereas the GMs, when I talk to them, they basically say to me, when people go to these places, I said, vegan menus, and they're like, well, when people are on holidays, they don't want to eat vegan, they want to have a break from eating vegan, so they want to have a burger. And I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. So when you listen to them, it's not simple, but the waste problem is something, in Phuket, where all the hotels are out on the beach cleaning up the beaches, the staff. They're really actively involved in doing whatever they can for the environment, but the bigger problem hasn't been solved, and that's what we need to be looking at, and that's a lot of pieces.
Right, and that cultural lag thing that we're talking about, that hits the locals more than anybody, right? The Balinese people are incredible, so warm, so loving. I mean, I have been welcomed to weddings, funerals, or I've been welcomed into the culture just so incredibly, and I'm super grateful for that. And my Balinese friends and I, we just want to fix it. It doesn't matter if it's a hotel doing it, or it's a beach club, or it's a banjar. It's just about getting in there and doing stuff, and actually, sort of fixing it. And I think one of the phrases, "Gotong royong," sort of together we're better, or together we can. Maybe bersama bisa is together we can. This is my bad bahasa. Better together. So, but ultimately, it's about that community spirit of coming together to make change. And I think, the Balinese people in particular, and Indonesian people as a whole, that's very much, they're like, well, we're in this situation now, let's go. So I think Renato said, it's not just about Bali. No, it's not. Globally, we waste 1/3 of our food. The interesting point on that, and Joe going on the economist side, that's not just the food waste, okay? You think about that. Every tomato, every piece of fruit, every piece of meat, what was the water required to grow that tomato? What was the fuel required from the farmer to get to his field, plow the field, sow the field, to harvest the field, to then prepare that? What about all the packaging? What about all the transport to get it from the property? Then to process it, then to package it again, then to fly it somewhere. It's all of these other things that are involved that blow the numbers out astronomically. So we think, we wasted that watermelon. Fuck that. Like, it's not about the watermelon. Like, what was the life cycle of that watermelon? How many resources went in from other parts of the world that are unrelated to food? How many resources does that one grape actually waste? And then it starts to go, oh shit. Then that for me was the real oh shit moment. It's not just about the food that you're wasting; it's all of the effort and resources that went into getting that food to you.
So the thing about economics for me is I look at it not the way I think most people do when we talk about economics. I am looking at the real big picture of things, right? I'm saying, like, is there a premium that's paid for that? So, like, for instance, I think tote bags became the real big thing for a while. Everyone said, if you get a tote bag, it's going to solve the world's problems. And then when you look into the economics of it, and when I talk about economics, it's not about price. It's about everything else, resources. Economics is actually about the allocation of resources. And it was found that, it's actually worse to manufacture tote bags because it's going to take the equivalent of 10,000 plastic bags worth of I can't remember they worked it out. Basically, it wasn't a good thing to go and buy a new tote bag. Not that plastic bags are great, but adding tote bags to it was actually worse. So, it's stuff like that. So I was looking for things like that, because I think we can look at the economic reasons to do things as well. And if you can quantify it and make it happen like this in a language that makes sense to everybody, I think that's fantastic. So I'm very pleased to hear that it makes economic sense. And I really think from a even a hotel's perspective, right? I mean, you can have your staff as much as they want to do good things, but if there is no way to make the argument that this is actually going to be good for the bottom line, then you're asking someone to do something just for the good of something, and you have to figure out other reasons for it as well. So it's great that financially it actually is useful, it is behaviorally, I think, very difficult to do. So I think the biggest challenge we have is cultural. How do you change the meaning of what people are doing every day? I mean, I was just thinking about how, if we're talking about how, as human beings, we want to do all these things that are responsible, and we often talk about nature. In nature, animals don't care about their poop. They don't care about the food they leave behind. They don't do anything like that. It happens to be that what they do happens to sort of be in balance, usually with the environment. We don't necessarily, I think, not everyone. Okay, the ideal situation is, yes, we all realize what's going on and we do what we have to do. But as I've talked about how, for instance, just investing for your retirement, most people don't do what is inherently necessary or would be good for them in the future anyway. So what is important is often neglected because we don't think about those things. We don't have that whole it needs to become an automatic thing. So the challenge for me is about government, because ultimately that's the biggest hand on the lever. I see Singapore as a really great example of that. There are a lot of things that we do that automatically create beneficial results. Now, it also means that there's certain things that don't quite work out that well as well. But like for instance, I just thought about how the American system of garbage disposals, right? That in their systems, if that was really done well, I think America actually could benefit from this whole system of the reuse or digestion of food waste. If America could become really could understand how it works, then the sewage system can link directly to digestion and stuff like that, and you could kind of harness it for the benefit. And systematically, this, I think, where garbage disposals are being used and where the sewage system is appropriately kind of channeled, that could be something like that. So I think we have to rethink the meaning of things, or rethink how we talk about the meaning of things, and to try and put it on a company to say that they need to do all these things. I actually think no, they don't need to. They should, absolutely should, but there is no need to. What governments need to do is to do things bigger, as in like they have to plan the big picture around it. If you want to bring a hotel into the area, then you have to put the infrastructure in place. If you want to have this industry in place, then you have to have the waste disposal that goes along with that. And that's what it should be, rather than making it all about the company that goes in. This is
you know how complicated it is out in these parts, and the layers of corruption and everything that goes on. I'm not talking about Indonesia, I'm talking about the whole region, right? So I mean, and the point is, we're here we are today, right? This is the problem, and the growth is not stopping. I mean, I was watching what was going on in Phuket, and it absolutely horrified me how much was happening. The roads aren't big enough. There's nowhere to put roads. Like, there's basically roads along the cliff that are 2-lane. There's no more space for more roads. The water was already running out in February, and they're building 16,000 new homes in the area I was living a year. Apartments, villas, that sort of stuff. So it's not, I mean, the problem's out of control, and it's getting more and more out of control, and the solutions are not happening, and nobody wants to spend the money. And then you put the layer of corruption on top of it, and it's just, and eventually it's going to be too bloody hot, or we're going to see some sort of environmental calamity where this whole place that it relies every single thing for its survivability on tourism, and there's no tourists because whatever's happened. So it's I mean, I know it's a big problem, but it's come on, it's just bloody crazy what's going on. When there's no one's taking a breath, especially since the pandemic.
And I'll back that up, Andrea. I think waste is a big problem, but if we go to sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and go back to the cultural lag, Southeast Asia and the developing world in general, I think they've got some other big fucking boxes to tick off first. Like, let's make sure that all of our population have access to one meal a day. Let's make sure that they have access to protein. You know, let's make sure they have access to shelter. You know, let's get some of these basics right. And that's the cultural lag. That's, you know, we sort of we're stuck on our screens looking at how other people are living in other parts of the world, and we get this sort of why don't we have that, you know? And then we sort of, and then we'll go out for a nice dinner or whatever, and oh my god, that's amazing. But then the realities of where we actually are very, very different, and so we have these two worlds competing. And you have to get the basics right first. And I believe that's where in the developing world, I believe that's where our focus should be, on making sure that our people are fed, making sure that they are safe, making sure they're secure, and then we can go up a tier and we can start to talk about education. Let's talk about healthcare. And should they care about separating their waste, you know, in the developing world before any of those things? Probably fucking not, to be fair. I wouldn't. If my family.
And they're not the big waste problem, right, when it comes to food waste, because they use everything, or they feed the chickens or the pigs. But you know, I was at Impact Week this week, and I heard from the president of Timor, and there was a lot of talk from Indonesia, especially after the protests. The percentage of children in Indonesia with stunting is incredibly high. You know, so you know that's a massive problem. So getting money into the country so that they can solve those sort of problems is obviously important, but there's ramifications to where this investment's coming, you know, what it results in, which, you know, so I'm with you, Tobes.
Yeah, it's the most biodiverse place in the world, 17,000 islands. It is stunning. The people are stunning. You know, fourth largest population in the world. There is so much potential here, which is just so exciting, and it's just a great place to be. And I'm, you know, very grateful to be able to call it home. It's so much opportunity, and that's what I'm really excited about. Is all of the stuff ahead of us as a nation, which and hopefully be part of being a force for good in that journey.
Yeah, nice. All right, so just to leave everyone with your final thoughts. So I see you as a source of inspiration for others. You know, when you see the elephant in your room, and it can be many, many things, right? What would you say to them?
Sorry, I don't really understand the question. Sorry.
You saw a problem and decided to fix it. A lot of people sit there and go, "We see lots of problems, but we can't do anything about anything." They put their hands up and they give up. Does that make more sense? What would you say?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Look, I'll reiterate that physical philanthropy. Now, whether that is, you know, to do something that you want to turn into something, because mine didn't. My physical philanthropy led me down another path, which ultimately got me to where Shiva is. But God, just get out there and do something in the surf. Break a sweat for somebody else. And it mow his lawns. You know, like it could be bloody anything. Get out there, and it could be cooking in a community kitchen. It could be anything. Pick any topic you want. You know, do you want to help animals? Do you want to help kids? Do you want to help humans? Do you want to help nature? So pick any of those topics and then go and break a sweat for somebody else. That would be where I would start.
I'm going to make a graphic for you that says that. We've got Ollie here. He was saying, I was listening to the Trail of Despair laid out by Tobias. Sorry, you're just Toby to me. I'm reminded of what has happened to Lake Turkana when Ethiopia built Gaib 3 Dam for hydro, but then also decided to use the runoff crop for irrigation. Was suddenly bereft of dramatic drops in the shallow but crucial. Yeah, I mean, and this is such a classic example of things just not being thought through properly, right? And the unintended consequences and corruption and greed, and you know,
of course,
and
greed is a very, very powerful emotion.
Yeah. And the short-term thinking, you know, and Nate Hagens has just done a new podcast where he's interviewing 2 psychologists, and they're talking about the dark triad personalities, and the inference is obviously we've got a lot of people at the top of politics and business who are in the dark triad. I've talked about it before. But one of the things that came through is they're not strategic. That's always their pitfall, and which also means they're not long-term thinkers, and this especially in the psychopathy sort of space, right? And so that's big danger of where we are right now. There's a lot of people in leadership roles around the world who sit in the psychopathy sort of space or the other dark triad space, and then they're not the people that are going to get us out of the problem that we're in. So I'm going to share that because it's a really worthwhile perspective to listen to. I think it's one of the biggest issues that we face is who is leading us right now, and are they the right people?
Well, if you believe in democracy, we have the leaders we deserve, right? Which is very much in line with my quite libertarian streak, that it starts with yourself and what you can do. I honestly, I don't think we're going to get anything positive coming on a structural scale from politicians, because the democratic system doesn't encourage a long-term strategic thinking, and we are very ingrained in a cycle that is totally focused on re-election. And when you're faced with a populace that effectively is unable to accept any short-term pain, you are not going to have the political apparatus helping us where we are here. I honestly do think it will come completely from market forces and capitalism forcing solutions.
Well, but then, Richard, we're in a different part of the world, right? And
yeah.
Where's democracy now? 70% of the world is not democratic, or is
No.
it 80%? Something like that, right?
No.
I actually think in this part of the world, it can be driven by government.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at countries like China, it's all being driven from the top down. Singapore's top down, different.
Yes.
And they're different. They're not the same. They're very different models,
They're very different models, but and here I understand why people, paradoxically and crazy as it sounds, are fed up with parts of democracy. China can afford to play the long game. Xi Jinping is not worried about an election cycle. He can play the long game. And what I see on a macro level is that China are taking a lot of strategic decisions that to me makes perfect sense, that we are not doing in the Western world, because he's not worried.
All right. So Japan is a democracy.
Yes.
And they have elections, but they also play the long game.
Yeah.
They do, because I think it's culturally much more ingrained in Asian thinking than it is in European, Western, Anglo-Saxon thinking.
Yeah.
But I don't see Japan having the ability to do what China does. And that's why you're now seeing quite a bifurcation within LDP about the leadership. And a betting man on some form of economic supremacy and higher gains would lead me to rather invest in China than Japan.
Yeah, well, they're in an environmental pickle and a political pickle at the moment. So, but the Fed in the US, Richard, what's your take on what happened this week?
Fed did what everyone expected and the market had fully priced in, which was to cut rates 25 basis points. Canada actually did the same a couple of hours earlier, and Norway did the same the next day, while the UK did not cut, which was not expected either. So all the central banks that were out this week did what was expected from them. And we're clearly in a phase where monetary authorities think we need lower rates, despite having inflation that is sitting well above any target they famously, championed and wanted to be attached to. And I've been a very, very vocal critic of central banks, and I think they are the real dark force and bandits in the modern economy. Because if you come from my side, which is like 35 years in financial markets, there is some superficial belief that central banks are the lenders of last resort, which is an absolute fallacy, because it's actually the planet that provides that. Central banks are a facilitator. And I also kind of, on a natural philosophical perspective, very much believe in balance. There are things that are in balance and things are good, and there are things that are not in balance and then things are not good. You watch a football team on the pitch, I can see a team that is balanced between defense and offense, and they function well. While teams that are really defensive, they're boring. Teams that are really offensive will never win anything because you actually have to defend too. But what central banks are doing to us as citizens and to our system is that they're actually circumventing our own ability to strive for some kind of balance. And in my mind, there is absolutely no debate about that interest rates in the world would have been much higher without central bank intervention. They are artificially depressing the price of money, which means we are able to extract more from the planet than what would have left us in balance, because we take it from somewhere. When you want to drive higher growth and higher investments, and your primary tool for achieving that is cheaper financing costs, you are taking that from somewhere. And there is something for me very ingrained in a really good business is almost immune to the level of interest rates. My business is so good, you can put rates at 8% or 2%. I really don't care because my business is good. All you're doing when you're artificially depressing the price of money is that you're propping up bad businesses that will not survive unless financing costs are artificially low. And you get stuck with zombie companies that provide no economic, no societal value. All they do are parasiting off an financial environment that allow them to buy and sell things, not actually produce anything that is of need because their product is not needed anymore. And it really, really is offensive to me as a investor looking for good ideas, looking where I can deploy my capital most efficiently, that you have these kind of distortions imposed on us by a monetary organization that has not been democratically elected by any electorate. It's appointed under a guise of being so-called independent. And what we're seeing now is very much an apparatus taking control of the monetary authorities, and have been doing for decades, to drive down artificially borrowing costs, because governments are effectively out of money and they need lower rates too, so they can keep on spending on their electorate. And it goes back to, the electorate's inability to accept short-term pain for long-term gain. Give me some money now. My cause is more worthy than yours, and I deserve to have funding allocated to my project. I can see the cabinet meeting, There is never, ever, I promise you this, in a cabinet meeting, a discussion of someone saying, we cannot cut the winter fuel payment for pensioners. They need that money to have a good living. Okay, we don't cut it, but you know what? We close down a few schools, or we put an extra 1-year waiting list for everyone having a hip replacement. There is never a debate like that, because you assume that money can be created, and money predominantly can be created by lowering borrowing costs. And that's the tool we're going to use to effectively create the illusion that we can do more, because I am someone who really believes in limits.
What do you think the illusion, how much time have we got for that?
Very little is my guess.
Yeah. So what are you expecting from a global, we're hearing all sorts of stuff, but a global economy, sort of October is usually when recessions kick in. So that's next month. So is it this year? Is it next year? What do you?
I don't think we're going to get into a recession, because the things that pushes global recessions are not present at the moment.
Okay.
I think we're in a slowdown. I think it's going to be felt, but essentially I don't see a recession coming. None of the indicators I typically look at are telling me a recession coming. But what's going to come at some point in the future here is effectively a reckoning of that limits matter. And I'm not sure what's going to give in first. My guess is that we're going to have a test on a Western government's ability to borrow money in the open market. And UK is the most likely candidate, because there is absolutely no fiscal restraint. I want to have money for everything. And The moment the markets decide, and we had our Liz Truss moment a couple of years ago when markets effectively forced her out of office.
Yeah.
Borrowing costs now are higher than they were back then. There is very, very little confidence in the UK governments to deliver fiscal stability. And it's not only UK. You see France, actually. I've spent 35 years in markets. I've never seen France having higher borrowing costs than Italy. They have that now.
Yeah, right.
That's how little faith.
France.
Yeah. That's how little faith the markets actually have in France's ability to show any kind of fiscal constraint.
Yeah.
And it's because the electorate wants more. I don't want a higher pension age.
Yeah, right.
But we're living longer.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, the concept of pensions, right? We've talked about that. And that's another reason why people should read your book. So, Ollie, 400 billion debt and 5% bite of global firms. And then, of course, we've seen this week the big tech companies coming over to the UK to make massive investments, which will be the tech gateway into Europe.
Yeah.
But this is cloud capital. This is artificial intelligence. This is, Peter Thiel, Palantir. It's all these companies. What does it mean? It's my son, he's 17, and he was showing me the new Meta glasses. And he was showing me these lovely little ads that Facebook and Meta have put together. Meta. A nice little sexy interaction between a girlfriend and a boyfriend, looking at a plant. Oh, what sort of a plant is it? Is this fruit ready to pluck? That was the imagery. And I said, okay, what's it bad for? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, think about that within the society that you live in. Could people spy on you? At the Tommy Robinson protest, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was some video footage of brown girls running for their life because the mob was starting to chase them. And I said, so could a group of those guys with those glasses on say, we've identified a whole bunch of brown girls on this street, let's meet there within 5 minutes and let's beat the shit out of them? That's a negative use of the technology, right? Just what's the negative to you, to your society? Cheating in school, cheating from each other, backstabbing even more. You can do a lot of that already, but just really trying to encourage him to, because that's what we don't do enough of.
No,
it's great.
And what I think you will find very, very soon in the UK, living here, is that, and we had a practical example 20 minutes ago. I got cut off because I actually had a power cut. And they come with some frequency now. They come back. It's a blip. It's 10, 15 seconds, but my server shuts down, right? My router shuts down. UK has the oldest electric grid in the world because it was effectively the first country that electrified. It's old. It's already operating at absolute capacity, more or less. And we're adding, a few cables here or there from offshore wind and, a few solar fields, whatever. But essentially, we're at capacity. Big tech is talking about building, 100 data centers in the UK. We can start the debate by saying, is data center the best use of land when you have one of the lowest levels of self-sufficiency in food at like 40%? Or should you actually have more farmland, and that should be a priority? The energy consumption on a data center, I would actually recommend everyone to have a look at how that compares to a medium-sized city. And the amount of water one of these facilities use, when this summer was so dry, 50% of UK fields couldn't produce anything. And you think it's a good idea to build 100 data centers. I mean, you have to live in some form of parallel universe with your Meta glasses on to think that that's a really good starting point, right? Yeah. We need investment. We need the growth, which brings us back again to the whole discussion about limits. Growth will always be the outcome of having done the right decisions. And if you make bad decisions, you get negative growth. You make good decisions, you get good growth. But when you make it your target variable for driving your decision-making process, I can promise you, you're going to make some really, really nasty and ugly trade-offs to get to that growth number.
Yeah. All right. Any thoughts before we move on? I'm just looking at the time. I want to. So the Australian Climate Risk Assessment Report was released, and I think this might have been sort of hanging around for a couple of years before they actually released it, right? And it looked at 10 priority hazards. And if you know Australia, you know there are things like bushfires, but also flooding, extreme heat. I want to show you a graph that let me quickly put it in here. This is the prediction of heat deaths in Australia. Yeah. If we get to 3 degrees of warming. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If we get to 3 degrees of warming, we're stuffed. So, like, you know, but anyway, Sydney, the heat death will increase by 444%. So, Steve, if you're listening, if you want to move to Sydney, Darwin, Sydney, probably don't look like a good idea. Melbourne, Launceston in Tasmania, obviously better. Bendigo, I'm sure, will be burning hot, as will Albury Wodonga. But yeah, so basically I went through this and I've seen some really interesting denier responses to it, right? There's no question that Australia is going to get absolutely hammered by climate change. It already is, and it's only going to get worse. And practically everyone in Australia has experienced something already. But basically the environment minister said it's cascading. It will get worse over time. It's compounding. Each impact of climate change will make another impact worse. And it's concurrent. So communities will suffer the impacts of climate change in different ways at the same time. And basically there'll be far too much to manage, including things like insurance and getting people into homes when they've lost their homes and all that sort of stuff. You know, they're saying 1.5 million people will be living in areas that will be impacted by rising seas, which aren't just from glaciers melting, but it's also from water expansion. They'll go from, you know, 1.86 flood days a year in Brisbane to 314 days a year if we get to 3 degrees Celsius. We're already stuffed at 3 degrees. It's a conservative report. It's still using the language of 2100. It's happening, and it's going to cycle up and cycle up and cycle up. At 2 degrees, we lose the corals. The Great Barrier Reef has already been bleached 6 times since 2015. I've said it before, and I keep saying it. We haven't lost the corals yet, but we've already lost the corals because what's coming will destroy the corals. And when people talk about that, they're like, "Oh, that's going to impact 1 billion people and the way they live and they eat." No, it's going to kill the ocean. It's part of the web of life, right? So this report's out. I think it's an important report. I get frustrated. So there's another piece in New York Times that's talking about the coral reefs again. And it's basically saying, oh, you know, the coral reefs are in danger. No, it's already a done deal. 2 degrees is when we lose the coral reefs. The ramifications from that, you know, are huge, and we're going to hit 2 degrees before the end of this decade, not by the end of this century. No. And that's common speaking points within the scientific community, within the client community. So anyway, just wanted to add a couple of climate things. Like we're still tinkering around the edges. We've got to get serious. You know, we need people like Toby in Bali doing everything they can to solve a big problem. And we need people at the global scale solving these big problems. We do not need short-term thinkers in leadership positions who are denying climate change. And we've got to get bloody serious because I'm fighting for my kids' futures. I don't care about me. I just want my boys to do what I want them to rock out and play heavy metal and have a smile on their face, you know. That's it. That's it. And I want them to be good human beings who are gentlemen in the world and, you know, are caring. And, you know, we're not doing what we need to do. Every single person on this planet needs to be doing something right now to fix the problem. Everyone, big or small, doesn't matter. Just get involved. We've got the Environmental Coffee House joining us. She does a great YouTube. She does a great YouTube series. When I'm always asleep when she's speaking, she's always asleep when we're doing this. So it's good to have you here, Sandy. All right. Vaccinations, Joe.
Oh, now we're getting into hot topics.
Well, it's like how we get about within 5 minutes at the end of the show. We're going to talk about just the light stuff now. Okay,
Yeah.
so you've heard how the environment basically is all screwed up. Now health is as well, right? So the progress that we've made over the centuries now in terms of vaccination and health and public health especially, basically has been thrown on the fire and incinerated. You know, I mean the attack on science has been so deliberate and so effective right now that you have a situation in the US where the kids that are going into school are not going to be vaccinated enough for them to have herd immunity from a number of very diseases that we had no real issues with for quite a while now. The most notable, of course, being in measles, in the area of measles. So in the U.S., there's so much mistrust about vaccines and the effect of vaccines, that the vaccination rates have dropped down so low. And now, I mean, it's interesting. But I was actually looking at a Jason's story about how things have become in the U.S. There was a story about a guy who had an AI girlfriend. I don't know if you saw that some time ago. He had a real life girlfriend as well as an AI girlfriend, and everyone's making fun of him for that. And it was actually as a result of something that was happening in his real life. He had real life people who actually threw him out of their groups because he had vaccinated himself, and talked about it. He had not asked them to be vaccinated. He had not done anything else. He got himself vaccinated, and that was a signal of his beliefs. And he got thrown out of a real life group, and that led to him finding other kinds of companionship. And in the end, for that particular area of interest, which was, I think it was astronomy, believe it or not, he was thrown out of that real life group, and so he found AI companionship. Now, the issue is that you have now people who have found such a strong voice and have such high credibility saying incredible things, and you have you also have an educational system basically that has not educated enough people about things. You also have entertainment, you also have public broadcasting that maybe hasn't been able to reach the audience, because the people who watch public broadcasting probably already are educated. Usually they don't create programs that actually go out there and go broadly as well. So the US is actually in its very worst state right now, where there is a whole bunch of people who don't really understand, or haven't at some point really understood how things work. And what's happened is they've been exposed by a very strong narrative created by people who create reasonable narratives, right? Because the first time you hear about network marketing, for instance, is the most incredible thing. There are no drawbacks to it, right? And if you haven't thought about, for instance, those kinds of things, you go like, well, this is the greatest thing. This is the thing we should always be going forward with, right? And when you have people being fearful about things like their children's safety, and so what they do is they avoid the vaccines because it might cause autism, but they don't understand statistics to understand that the linkages may not be about that. It might be about what do you call it, visibility, right? As we progress, we're going to have things reported more. We're going to find out more things. There's a reason why, for instance, we have the highest incidence of ADHD ever in history. It's not because suddenly we have a whole lot more people who have ADHD. It's just that people begin to know what it is, and then you go like, oh, okay, that might be me. And then you might check yourself out and you go, oh, maybe I have ADHD. But it's always been there. So with things like autism and vaccinations and stuff like that, the problem now is that the public healthcare, which is built on it is actually built on statistics. It is built on the action of large numbers. That can't happen anymore. As you know, it can't be sustainable anymore, because even if 75% or 80% of the audience actually does go through vaccinations, that 20% that does not can pose a risk to the greater mass as well. And that's the issue that America is facing. And the challenge now is also moving forward what's going to happen. We've had the cancellation of the research into other things, like the big cancellation was about the money being withdrawn from the research into bird flu, which is arguably one of the big risks that America faces right now. Now, controversially, I think Donald Trump did something really, really good for the world, for which he should have got a Nobel Peace Prize, and that's Operation
Okay.
Warp Speed. Right? Operation Warp Speed for humanity was actually a tremendous thing.
Mm.
And I mean, the politics around it, of course, make it impossible. And even now, because of the politics, he can't even claim it as something that he's proud of. But we should be. You know,
Yeah.
he should absolutely be proud of it in terms of having impact on the world, a global good that he did. Operation Warp Speed was that, right? But the mood, the tone, all that is making that impossible. And the real challenge is because of social media and because of people finding someone else to say what they didn't have quite had the words for before. It ironically creates an intellectual kind of vaccination. When you hear about an idea and someone says something about the way you feel and it seems to make sense, you begin to adopt that and then you build a wall around it. So that if you discover that you have, even if you're slightly unsure about, for instance, vaccinations, and someone articulates your fears in such a way that you go like, yes, that makes sense to me, you become inoculated against the other ideas that can help sort of mitigate that as well. So that's the challenge we have right now.
All right, Joe. I got to ask you a couple of things because I've been thinking about it this week. I didn't realize how many anti-vaxxers I have in my life, but of course I do. And Toby either has them in his life or his family could be anti-vaccine for their family. It's a really common thing in this part of the world, especially for people going to island life because they're escaping that, right? But I just want Sandy said, do you think because the population has increased so much that ADHD growth is just a normal curve? I actually think, the vaccine, if you actually look at the vaccination when they came in, and we know that the MMR vaccine creates autism has been debunked multiple times. So it's like, but I think the industrialization of food, forever chemicals, microplastics, nanoplastics, if you look at the growth, they're perfectly aligned. So that's just my thing. I'm not saying it as obviously as a scientist. Sandy doesn't think he deserves anything, and Dr. Fauci should get the Nobel Prize for what he did. And of course, how divisive is that as an opinion if you're an American, right? I thought Dr. Fauci was amazing. And then Ollie's saying Science Under Siege, which of course we talked about last week. And Professor Peter Hotez, really, like, if you can have a read of this book, it hasn't arrived for me yet, but if you can read his perspective, he talks about being a scientist during this period of time. But I was going back to what I was saying about the anti-vaxxers that are in my life, right? So there's a lot of crowing going on. See, we were right, right? And I'm like, okay, this is a group of people that have been screaming for a long time. They really believe in what they think, right? And I have never had an issue with the anti-vaxxers around me, right? My kids, I vaccinated the shit out of them because my mum was a nurse, and because my aunt, who's now in a wheelchair, has had a whole life living with polio, and it's been really, really hard watching that. She's an incredible woman. She's so strong. I'm thinking I should interview her just to give people a sense, right? But I don't have an issue with people who don't vaccinate, even though I know that means if you're around a lot of people who don't vaccinate and you've got a newborn baby, for 1 year, you basically can't be around other people if there's any risk to the baby. If you've got any sort of illness, you've got it. It's the same with COVID, right? You're talking about percentages. We need 95% of the population vaccinated from the measles to stop the measles coming through, right? So if only 80% vaccinate, then the measles are coming back, and that's not even something we should be dealing with right now, right? Polio, no one wants to see that monster back. We got these. It's still the same. It's still going to do the same things. You can't cure it. So I don't know. I find it like I was like I never had an issue with the people who thought like that, but I don't think it should be in government.
Well, the
but
thing is, at a higher level, that's the whole thing, right? You're supposed to be at a higher level. You're supposed to be thinking at a higher level. The problem is, to be in that higher level of government, you have to appeal to the lowest levels, and
yeah,
that's the equation. That's the equation that's going to mess things up, right? Because so the ultimate, and the reason why sociopathy is such an inherent part of that is because the system demands it, right? So democracy as a system is great. Winning in democracy requires you to play the game, and the game that wins you and that gives you a win democracy actually is sociopathy, right? Because
yeah,
you realize that the very few people who don't want it who get it, right? The very few people who don't want the power, who don't want to be in charge, who actually just want things to be right, they're not the ones who are going to end up running for an election, right? I mean, if there was some kind of process in the world where whether or not you were running for election, someone could put you in office, that would be interesting, right? You have all these reluctant leaders. But what we do have is people who go like, no, what I have to do is convince you to give up your power to me so that I may have power over you. And the only way I can do that is I promise to do what you want. I want to make sure that you get what you want. And the reality of it is, there isn't going to be a way of doing that. You can't. Even like if you talk about the Singapore, I would call it kind of exception. Even though it's exceptional, it still also runs on the idea that, you know what, you're only going to be able to serve the needs of 80% of the people at a time. And if you do that extremely well, you kind of win.
Yeah.
But the democracy to me is a very special kind of disease. It needs to be managed.
but 80% of Americans want vaccination. There's a big push for it, but I don't know. It's just that this small percentage is now in a position of power, and
I'll tell you how it works, right? For vaccinations,
Toby.
Sorry?
Toby wanted to jump in.
Guys, let's go back to what we were talking about earlier about the extremes. I mean, so you're talking about some astronomer getting kicked out of his friend group. Let's go back to the pandemic where millions of people were torn away from their families and friends and jobs because they didn't vaccinate. So let's be very clear that, treatment on both sides is extreme, right? Like,
I know, but there's
no victim play for either side, right? Like this is the way the system is built. Yep. Now we've created these very two clear pockets. You're anti-vax and you're vax, right? And it's mental. And then we're talking about we talk about in the waste world, how do we get people to separate? Wow, it'd be great if we could lift the needle like a couple of points. But now we're talking about we need 95% coverage from a specific drug that is built by a private company. Let's be like really. So we can't fix waste. We can't fix energy. We can't fix the environment because we can't get the critical mass. But oh shit, we can get up to the 90s. And we must have 95% coverage. Let's go back to Andrea's sort of critical thinking with Jax, I believe it was. What's the play here? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm all for living safely, but if we talk about ADD, and Andrea and I talked about this earlier this week, since coming to Bali and moving out of town and getting into more and more nature and more physical and better food, cleaner food, which I believe, Andrea, I 100% agree with you around preservatives and all that sort of jazz. And I think there's very clear links with there. But I've stopped all medication. I'm a mental health survivor, I'm proud to say. But ADHD, I was on the heaviest meds for decades. Anxiety, all of this sort of stuff, like things that I thought I needed to live. But moving some of these other things. And so I guess I'm not going to fight either side, but I can see both sides. I can see both fights. We're force-fed like for the foie gras geese, but by the same media that we were whinging and bitching about earlier at the start of the podcast. Rightly so. But
if I can just say about the scientists, how the scientists view things like the separation during COVID and closing of schools and stuff like that, right? Because I work with CIDR, which is an organization here about diseases and stuff. When they look back at that time, they don't look at it and say that was a good move. They don't say that was a good thing. They don't think that was the best of moves. They realize that there were mistakes that were made along the way. And the challenge is about making moves based on the best available information or knowledge at the time. Right? If you make a choice and it's at least based on some ideas, you go like, okay, this strategically looks and seems to make sense. So just a simple example about why COVID is such a hot potato as well, is that the vaccines, when they were developed and when they were first rolled out, and this is when we go back to the different variants. Right now we are at Omicron and beyond. But when the vaccines came out, it was at Delta, right? And actually, for Delta, the vaccines worked extremely well. The data was there as well. And people said that there's no proof of it. No, actually, Israel was the proof of it. Israel rolled out the vaccines the way they did, and the numbers. So if people talk about it, there were no numbers available. Actually, no, the numbers were available because a large-scale experiment had been conducted, and it was done by Israel. And so for Delta, things work. So a lot of things that we talked about for the vaccines and the ideas of what it should do and all that were completely true for Delta. But when the enemy changes and Delta moves on and becomes Omicron, when it evades the vaccine and what have you, it changes, the rules of engagement change. But the rules of measuring the success of it frequently for the audience does not change. So whatever was said about the vaccine against Delta, which remained true about the Delta variant, nobody said, oh, but the enemy has changed. That this is different now because Omicron works differently. It circumvents the vaccination in that particular way. It still has some positive results, but it's not the kind of protection you would have got against the Delta variant. And that's the scientific talk about things.
Okay.
However, politically, it's very convenient to say, aha, we were right. You know, it's the guy who says after 20 years of buying a lottery ticket and losing hundreds and thousands of dollars, and he wins it at the end. He says, "I am right." I go like, yeah, it's not as valid as in like we are all going to make mistakes along the way. There are going to be things, and I think one of my, just because I have a trading background, one of the ideas that I've always loved and hated at the same time is if there's a guy who just says, I'm going to say both things at the same time all the time, eventually one of my opinions is going to be correct.
Yeah, because what I think my stand on because I don't stand either way, is the further we get away from nature, the more that we're putting foreign stuff in us, either through our air, soil, water, food, whatever, the sicker we'll get. And I think, you know, what Richard was talking about earlier with the extraction, you know, by suppressing the economy or suppressing costs, we allow for more blanket extraction. And I think that absolutely, it affects us as an organic species. Absolutely. So the further you get away from natural sunlight and nature and actually clean food and clean water and things like that, then, you know, the sicker you and we will be. I mean, that's and I'm not a scientist. I'm not on either side. I'm not fighting either side. What I am fighting for, and I do it in my daily life, is nature. Being as close to that as possible. We can't consume our way out of waste. You know what? Our way into health.
And I think we've got to acknowledge the deeper issue that's at play here, and that is trust. There is no trust. We don't trust the pharmaceutical companies because they're private. You know, like Hotez, who we were talking about earlier, he did design a vaccine that could be put straight out into the public, not through not a private company, right? There's no trust anymore, so we don't trust anything. And if you don't trust anything, no wonder the democracies, we don't trust our governments, we don't trust the private companies, we don't trust our healthcare, we don't trust the legal system, our police. Like we don't trust the media, we don't trust social media, we don't trust our neighbours, we don't trust anyone. And that's the problem. We've got to get some level of consensus. It's like the collective good needs to come back into the center of things rather than, this tiny percentage that benefits in all of these different places. That's one of the things I love about living in Asia. The collective good is at the center of societies in this part of the world. But it didn't matter what people in Asia did. It didn't matter what Singapore did. While America was keeping its borders open and letting COVID run free and people jumping on planes still traveling everywhere. The way Europe and, if I've said it before, if the Western world looked to Asia on how to manage COVID, it would have been a much better process, right?
In its tracks, right?
And it was that arrogance towards the virus. Viruses, I couldn't believe it at the time what people were saying. I'm like, you don't go to war with the virus because you're never going to win. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that in terms of, going back to nature, about cohesiveness, all those things, these are all things supported by science. There is science that shows all this is true, by the way. So don't push away science because you assume that it's going to be leaning you towards technology. A lot of science actually says technology isn't that good as well. So, and the thing is, none of that is fundamentally 100% true. There are always different circumstances, right? So someone who's suffering from any kind of like a mental challenge, what have you, the environment is absolutely something to do with it. If you're in an urban environment and you're perhaps someone who's just, who knows, right? I mean, fundamentally, you're the Bendigo boy. You love things the way it was. That's what formed you. And when you came back, you went like, oh, this is really good. This feels comfortable. It's not a challenge, right? Whereas when we go into an environment where we're always being hit by all kinds of stimulus everywhere, because I think I'm undiagnosed ADHD, but I've got all the stimulus happening all the time. Now, I happen to be someone who copes, I think, with that, but I can see how it's challenging. Not everybody's going to be able to handle that large volume of things, and different people are going to act out differently. If we figure a way to have people know more about more things and just have an epidemic of wisdom, I think that could be interesting.
I don't know. When I turned up in Phuket 8 years ago, I reckon I spent about 6 months going, wow, it's good to get out of Singapore, man. You don't realize it when you're in it. I mean, it's an intense place, and I'm consciously not doing that. All right, one final quick story. The Nerd Reich are buying TikTok. So if you haven't heard what the Nerd Reich is, there's a guy called Gil Duran who's been talking about it for years and years and years. Mainstream media is looking into it. So Oracle and Andreessen Horowitz. So Andreessen is Mark Andreessen, who's one of the Nerd Reich members. But Oracle, obviously, Larry Ellison, who's someone I used to come across in my working life. And seriously, that man, do you know he was the richest man in the world for 24 hours last week?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the database company's back. All right. So the final thing we do, what are you doing apart from everything that we've talked about today, and including work? What's keeping you distracted? Something that other people could take.
Oh, I'm happy to go first. I'm favorite sport is cycling. We're in World Championship week starting Sunday, I think, with the time trials.
Okay.
And for the first time ever, they're held in Africa, which I think is kind of interesting. So what I've seen so far, our organization is excellent. They've re-tarmacked the road. It should be a fantastic race culminating next Sunday with the men's elite road race. The circuit in Kigali, it looks, actually, I think someone dug up statistics and said it's going to be the most climbing we have ever had in the World Championships for about 80 years. They're going to do 6,100 meters of vertical climbing next Sunday, which by any metric is an absolutely brutal day. And we don't know what the temperature will look like. They promised that it wouldn't be extreme, but extreme, I think, in cycling protocol would be over 40, so it could be mid-30s. 275K with 6,000 meters plus of climbing in 35 degrees. Good luck, guys.
Yeah. Oh, I used to race bikes. All right, Toby, what about you? What's keeping you distracted? I saw your little one just come in then.
Yeah. It's sorry, I got a little bit derailed. I might go to push to Joe if that's okay.
All right.
Well, I think I've been distracted by everything. But what distracts me the most on a daily basis right now is just trading. I'm, gold is what I trade, and it's at the kind of like, it's just recently had its all-time highs, and then it's a question of where the price is going. So my mission for the year has been to trade to $1 million in profits for myself, and I'm also just re-engaged with a group of students who I taught to trade some time ago, and I want to take them to a similar place as well. So that's my big thing. But I am generally distracted by everything that's interesting that comes along. So unfortunately, that's the case. My sister's starting up, building it, things that I can't do for myself, I can do for others. So she's asked for my help to help build her website and stuff like that, and that's going to happen very quickly, just because it's not me. And tonight, I'm actually going to a live taping of a podcast. It's literally something I can do at home, but I'm going to watch Diary of a CEO done live at the Star Vista.
Right. He's in town, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. All right, Tobes.
Yeah, so the floods have very much sort of taken over here, and the team and I have been working on how do we create a super cheap bucket system, a home composting system that we can donate to the community, but then they can replicate cheaply on their own, that they can be scaled. So we've nailed that actually, and
nice.
It's about $5 Sing a bucket, $4 Sing a bucket. We'll put our microbes in there, and we're donating 2,500 of those over the coming weeks, just to get the organics out of the waste flow, which means that less mixed waste, which means it can be managed properly and doesn't end up in rivers and streams and block drains and cause or add to the issues that we've been facing. So that's been my distraction away from sort of day-to-day dadding, husbanding, trying to find time to hang out with friends, but mostly just hanging out at the factory. So that's been the big distraction for me, and just trying to, once again, I think, act, not talk about anything, or, not study floods, actually get in and kind of, do what we can do with what we have, the resources that we have available.
Nice.
I had a feeling about this right at the start. I was just going to say, Toby, when you first came in, I knew you were going to make what I do sound frivolous. Well done.
Hey, I'm not trying to make $1 million in gold. What are you talking about? Not frivolous at all. Awesome.
Well, you can make it in compost gold, hopefully. Okay, so I've got a show for you to watch on Netflix, and it is AKA Charlie Sheen. Has anyone watched it yet?
No.
Heard about it.
Oh
Same
my
here.
God. Oh my God, I had no idea. This guy is out of control. I can't believe he's still alive. And I'll tell you, the star that comes through on that is his dad, Michael Sheen.
Yeah.
Just loving him all the way through, no matter what. Yeah, but this is like, man, you have no idea what this guy got up to. And you forget so much of it, right? Because he was a star when we were teenagers, right? But yeah, if you get a chance, and what's so amazing about this show is he's just so honest about everything he's done, and what, and he's not asking for our forgiveness. He's just 100% honest. I think that's a really important quality. A little bit more transparency in the world, rather than people pretending and hiding behind, because he talks about homosexual experiences, and he's not homosexual, and how that and it was because of the drugs that he was taking, and how he sort of processed that information. And it's a really fascinating perspective. So I definitely, if you're open-minded, watch it.
Yeah.
That's great.
If I can summarize the idea of what Charlie Sheen is to me, right? He's Donald Trump without politics.
No, watch this. You might change your mind, actually. No, there's so much more. There's a lot more to him than I think. That's
Right.
what I definitely took that away. But anyway, Tobes, thank you so much for joining us. Really great to hear from you. And for someone who doesn't pay attention to the news, beautiful contribution to the conversation. Richard J.
Thank you so much. Refreshing my biology and physics and chemistry. Fantastic.
Yeah. And if there's anything we can do to help promote what you're doing, I can introduce you to a bunch of GMs. So just, yeah, it's awesome. It's really, really awesome what you're doing. And I just want everyone to take inspiration and just do something. What was it? Break a sweat for someone else. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that in a quote for you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you everybody. It was a really epic conversation, and we covered so much territory that I didn't think we were going to cover, and we certainly covered that and more. So really appreciate the time, platform, and discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And by the way, if you're watching all the way to the end, you might as well do the next thing and just like, subscribe, and tell somebody else about the show. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd appreciate it.
Exactly.
All right. Happy weekends, everyone.